Heading into Atlanta this weekend, there were two very real fears hanging over Shane Van Gisbergen. The first was Austin Hill. The two of them had just been summoned to the NASCAR hauler after 3 incidents in 4 weeks, and everyone was bracing for pack racing to blow the whole thing wide open. The second fear was quieter but just as real. Van Gisbergen himself had openly called himself the weak link on ovals only weeks earlier. Neither fear came true the way anyone expected. Hill and Van Gisbergen never even found each other on track. And instead of struggling, Van Gisbergen delivered maybe the best oval performance of his entire NASCAR career, running as high as 4th late, and genuinely 3 wide for the lead with the eventual race winner as the field came to the white flag in overtime. So today, let's break down exactly what happened at Atlanta, why it matters so much more than a simple 6th-place finish suggests, and why Van Gisbergen's own words afterward tell you everything about how far he's actually come. Stay with me. Welcome back to Freedom Line News, the channel where we don't just chase the drama, we break down what really happened. If you're new, hit subscribe. This community is growing every week. Let's get into it. Let's deal with the Hill situation first, because it's the story a lot of people expected to dominate this weekend. On Saturday, NASCAR called both Van Gisbergen and Hill to the hauler for a 17-minute sit-down, following their Chicagoland incident the week before. Van Gisbergen was candid about the experience afterward, saying simply, "I don't really want to do it again," but he was also clear that he wasn't going to change who he is on track. "I'm not going to back down or be threatened by someone," he said, "but I don't want to fight anyone either." He talked about needing to race with respect, to try cutting Hill some breaks, while being honest that there's real risk over the final 7 races of the regular season as he fights to make the chase. And here's the genuinely good outcome. Whatever was said in that hauler, or whatever both drivers privately decided, it worked, at least for this week. Van Gisbergen and Hill simply never crossed paths in a meaningful way during the race. No contact, no incident, no headline. Sometimes the best follow-up to a feud story is that nothing happened, and that itself is worth knowing, because it means the tension everyone was bracing for didn't define this race. Because what did define the race was Van Gisbergen's driving. This was a genuinely wild night at Atlanta. A 3-hour weather delay, a race that stretched into overtime, and Van Gisbergen right in the mix of it from a 12th place start. He fought through traffic all night, cracked the top 10 after the delay, and kept working forward. By lap 194, he'd climbed to a race-high 4th. Through a chaotic final stretch of cautions and pit strategy, he found himself in genuine contention as the race headed toward its green-white checkered finish. And then came the moment that matters most. Coming to the white flag in overtime, Van Gisbergen was running alongside race leader Ryan Blaney, genuinely racing for a spot at the front in a 3-wide battle. He didn't hold that position. The closing laps at a drafting track like Atlanta are chaos, and he ultimately got shuffled back, crossing the line in 7th before Bubba Wallace's late penalty for going below the yellow line promoted him 1 more spot to a final 6th. But think about what actually happened there. This was not a driver hanging on for a respectable finish. This was a driver genuinely mixing it up for the win at a super speedway-style track in a cup car against the best drafters in the entire sport. And this is exactly why this result matters so much more than the 6th-place finish on paper suggests. Remember what Van Gisbergen said about himself only weeks ago? That he was still the weak link as a driver, that ovals were the part of his game he desperately needed to improve. That wasn't false modesty. It was an honest, specific admission from a driver who knew exactly where his weaknesses were. Atlanta is the direct answer to that admission. His own words afterward capture it perfectly. "Nothing in his career prepared him for NASCAR at Atlanta," he said, and yet he was there, in the fight, at the white flag, with the race winner. He admitted his brain was, in his words, going crazy afterward, thinking about what he could have done differently in that final battle, which is itself revealing. Drivers don't agonize over what they could have done better in a race they were never actually competing to win. He was dissecting a legitimate shot at victory. This is what real improvement looks like in this sport. It's not a sudden transformation. It's a driver who openly admitted his weakness, kept grinding through difficult ovals all season, and then arrived at one of the hardest, most unforgiving styles of track on the calendar, and found himself racing for the win in overtime. There's also a smaller, quieter moment from this race worth mentioning, because it says a lot about where Van Gisbergen stands in the garage now. After the race, Tyler Reddick specifically sought him out to talk through the closing restarts, not to criticize, but to genuinely coach him. Reddick explained the importance of the launch on these drafting-style tracks, telling him plainly that he himself lost a lot of ground on one restart and wanted to help Van Gisbergen have a real shot at winning next time. That's not how established veterans treat a driver they see as a lost cause. That's how you treat someone you believe is genuinely close to breaking through. And the numbers back up how solid this night actually was. Despite dropping one spot in the standings to 15th, purely because several rivals around him also had strong points days, Van Gisbergen actually gained ground relative to the chase cut line. He now sits 31 points clear of missing the playoffs entirely, with 6 regular season races remaining. Combine a genuine near win at one of the sport's toughest ovals, unsolicited coaching from a championship-caliber driver, a diffused rivalry, and a growing points cushion, and Atlanta might end up being one of the most quietly important weekends of Van Gisbergen's entire season. So now I want to hear from you. After watching him run 3 wide for the lead at Atlanta, do you still think of Shane Van Gisbergen as the weak link on ovals, or has that label already expired? And do you think he and Austin Hill can keep racing clean the rest of the season, or is this rivalry just resting? Drop it in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to Freedom Line News, where we cover every NASCAR story with the detail it actually deserves. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.